One of the central principles in Buddhism is called dukkha, which is usually translated as suffering, but it also implies discontent, unsatisfactoriness, and change. The Buddha's main teachings are about suffering and the ending of suffering. That's Buddhism in a nutshell. There is suffering, and suffering can end, and here's how. When I first learned about it, I was very skeptical. I'm skeptical of any product, any program, or religion that claims to be able to end suffering. And I recommend that you be skeptical of any such promotion as well. But as I learned more, I found out that what Buddha means by ending dukkha is that if we keep it real, then we can learn to accept what is. And then we'll be much more successful and much more satisfied with our lives. Buddha explained how most people live their lives with illusions about life, and about marriage, and about parenting, and about work, and about relationships. So that when they measure their own life against their illusion, they suffer. Hollywood and advertising do a great job of promoting and exploiting our illusions about ourselves and our world. That's why Buddha is so refreshing, because he's honest about the fact that life is filled with suffering and dissatisfaction and change. It's filled with a lot of great things, but it's also filled with suffering and dissatisfaction and change. And then he provides the tools and the ways of finding peace and acceptance with what's real. And the truth shall make you free. The reason that truth is so liberating is that it exposes the illusion that the normal state of life is joy, and that everything else then is abnormal and needs to be avoided and overcome. It's freeing because so much of the dissatisfaction, discontent, and mental suffering that we have is due to the fact that so often our life does not live up to our expectations. There's the way we think our life is supposed to be, and then there's the way our life really is. And there's a gap. And Buddhism is about trying to narrow the gap. We have images of the perfect marriage, the successful child, the good life. And when our life doesn't live up to it, we think that the way we think it's supposed to be, well, here comes the dukkha. And if we don't have the resources to deal with what's real, then depression and addiction and despair start knocking at our door. And then there's always the popular coping mechanism of denial. Oh, everything is glorious. I am so blessed. God is good all the time. As if they think that if they keep saying it, then someday they might start believing it. This isn't about God, of course. This is about our understanding of our life and our world. Yet the reason that Buddha begins with suffering is that because it's the most universal human experience. Not everybody experiences success like these young people who we blessed this morning. Not everybody experiences being loved fully for who they are and all of what they are. But everybody at some point in their lives experiences pain and suffering. So that's where Buddha starts, with the universal human experience. And even though this is a universal human experience, it's something that we don't like to talk about. People don't talk about. We try to avoid it, pretend like it's not there, like it shouldn't be there, like our life shouldn't have this, which means that most of the time we keep it fake. In many ways, we're taught to be ashamed of our discontent and our dissatisfaction and our suffering. Sharon Salzberg says that when I was first in India and I heard the Buddha's teachings on suffering, I felt as though I was handed a precious gift. Finally, someone was speaking openly about how things really are. Suffering does exist. While there is great pleasure in the world, there is always a great deal of pain. There are wonderful times of coming together, but there's also difficult times of parting and losses. There's birth and there's death. And she says, I feel like I was hearing the truth for the first time, a truth that no one else wanted to talk about. Salzberg goes on to explain how common it is for families to deny suffering. It's not unusual for families to be in denial about problems or illness or violence. The inability or unwillingness to confront these kinds of issues leads to even more suffering. By hiding these things from our children, we foster distrust. Children can sense when something's wrong. We know that. We know that children know, even if no one says anything. They could feel it in the household. They could feel it in their bones. But it's confusing to them when no one's talking to them about it, no one's being honest with them, so it begins to breed distrust of them in themselves as well as in adults. You know, I know adults who shared stories with me. You may have heard stories like this of when they were children, someone in their family died, and they were told that they went on a trip. They were never told that they died. So the person felt abandoned, and the person always got anxious anytime anyone was going on a trip or a vacation. People have told me about stories of how one parent hid or denied that the other parent was either addicted or violent from the children, but then they knew something was wrong. And in hiding it, it just made it more confusing for the children. And it made them think that something was wrong with them. In this sense, recognizing and acknowledging what's real is liberating. Acknowledging a problem may not cure the problem, but it may offer healing. In both of these cases that I was talking about just now, once the children were told the truth, it didn't change a bad situation, but it helped them to begin to make sense of their lives. Whether the issue is death, divorce, disease, or discord of some kind, acknowledging what's real may not be able to change the end of the story, but it can transform the situation in the present and set you free. When Buddha spoke of ending suffering, he was not referring to ending the suffering of disease or bodily pain or death. He was referring to the mental suffering that comes from the denial of our natural conditions. Another catchphrase that we hear people saying all the time is, I want to feel whole. I'm seeking my wholeness, right? We've heard this. But many people equate wholeness with happiness. They know that they're whole when they feel happy. But there's a problem with that. Because if you only acknowledge the positive aspects of life when we're feeling happy, well, that's not wholeness. That would be lopsidedness. Because what's real is that all of life has suffering as well as joy. When we try to eliminate certain feelings that we have, we're trying to eliminate parts of ourselves. It is interesting that when we experience the real feelings, then we experience the wholeness of life. Then we experience wholeness when we can accept them. Now, there's New Age philosophies out there that try to say that there are quote-unquote negative emotions, and we need to know what they are, and when they come up, we need to block them and erase them from our mind and try not to think about them, stop them, block them. And what I'm trying to say today is that, and what the Buddha has said for generations, is that is absolutely wrong, bad and destructive way to live. That there's a great story that the Buddha used to tell about a man who is looking underneath, he's on his hands and knees under a street lamp, looking, feeling on the ground, and another friend walks up and he sees him doing that, and he says, what's going on? He said, well, I lost my key. Can you help me find it? And so the friend says, sure. And he gets down on his knees, and he's down there, and they're crawling around looking for this for a while. And then after, it's been a long, long time, the friend says, now, are you sure you lost your key here? And his friend said, oh, no, I didn't lose it here. I lost it inside. And he said, well, why are we looking for it out here? And the friend says, well, the light is so much better out here. This is how a lot of people look for wholeness, right? They want to go where all the light is. Let me follow the light. I'm going to go where it's light and happy and cheery, and I'm going to find my wholeness there, when, in fact, they're avoiding the darkness. And the Buddhist teacher, Jack Kornfield, says it's not darkness that's our opponent, but our rejection and our denial of it. It's often in our greatest difficulties that we find the world's everlasting and unquenchable light.